Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps.
Okay, so imagine this. A guy, 47 years old, healthy airline pilot. He's at a neighborhood barbecue, eats a hamburger, goes home, mows his lawn, reads the paper. Just a totally normal evening. And then, hours later, he's found unconscious.
And the initial findings are nothing.
Nothing. The autopsy is a complete dead end. No heart attack, no stroke. The ruling is just sudden and unexplained.
A total mystery.
Until months later, when forensic evidence finally confirms that the hamburger he ate was the trigger. It was the first officially reported human death from something called alpha-gal syndrome, AGS.
And this case is, it's absolutely critical. For years, specialists knew that deadly anaphylaxis was a theoretical risk with alpha-gal, but it had never actually been confirmed.
What if?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The investigation into this pilot's death, which we've been studying in the case reports, it confirms that AGS is, well, it's a high-stakes threat we have to take seriously now.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive into the sources, the case reports, the medical news, to really get the timeline of this fatality, the science that cracked the case, and maybe most importantly, why this red meat allergy from a simple tick bite is spreading so fast.
And that timeline is it's tragic because it reveals the biggest danger of AGS, which is the delay, the reaction time.
Right.
That unique lag is what let the trigger stay hidden. It confused everyone until it was just too late.
What's so wild about this is that it wasn't even the first time he had a severe reaction.
No. The sources point to a massive warning sign just 2 weeks earlier. He was on a camping trip, ate a steak.
And then what happened?
That's when the delayed allergy first reared its head. He woke up at 2 a.m. with debilitating symptoms.
Like what?
Severe diarrhea, horrible stomach pain, vomiting. He even told his son later, "I thought I was going to die."
Wow. But the problem, I guess, is that it happened hours after the meal.
That's the whole issue. They chalked it up to food poisoning. They never thought this is an allergic crisis, so they didn't see a doctor, didn't connect it to the beef at all.
So he had a full-blown anaphylactic episode that was completely missed, which then brings us to the fatal night in September.
Right. He eats the hamburger at the barbecue. 4 hours go by, and he starts to feel sick.
But not like collapsing sick.
No, not at all. Crucially, he was still functional. He mowed the lawn. He sat down to read the paper. It wasn't until around 7:30 that evening that his son found him.
And as you said, the autopsy couldn't find a cause because all the usual markers for a sudden death just, they weren't there.
It creates this enormous diagnostic challenge. Dr. Thomas Platzmills, he's the researcher who actually discovered alpha-gal. He put it perfectly.
What did you say?
He said, the tragedy is that they didn't think of that episode, the one from 2 weeks earlier, as anaphylaxis, and therefore didn't connect it to the beef at the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. If it's hours later and mostly stomach issues, you and the doctor are probably thinking it's a stomach bug, not an allergy.
Exactly. You lose that critical window to intervene.
So this massive event, a sudden death, it all comes down to a tiny interaction. Here's where it gets really interesting. How does a tick bite lead to an allergy so powerful it can kill you 4 hours after you eat a hamburger?
Well, at its core, alpha-gal syndrome is an allergy to a sugar molecule.
A sugar, not a protein.
A sugar, technically an oligosaccharide called alpha-gal, and it's naturally found in the meat of most mammals, so your beef, lamb, pork, deer.
And the delivery system is the Lone Star tick, which we're seeing more and more of, especially across the Northeast and Midwest.
That's the one. The tick first has to bite a mammal, say a deer, and it picks up that alpha-gal sugar in its saliva.
Okay.
Then, when that same tick bites a human, it injects the sugar molecule into the person's bloodstream.
And the human immune system sees this sugar from another mammal and basically treats it like an invader. It builds up an army of antibodies against it.
You got it. So the next time you eat red meat, your immune system sees that same alpha-gal sugar and it launches a full-scale attack.
Which leads to the symptoms, the nausea, the cramps, hives, breathing trouble, but always 3 to 6 hours later.
And this connects right back to the pilot. His wife mentioned that she saw what she thought were chigger bites around his ankles the summer before he died.
But the researchers now think those weren't chiggers at all.
No, they're almost certain they were bites from the larva of the Lone Star tick.
So these tiny little bites, maybe a year earlier, were enough to prime his immune system for that fatal reaction to the hamburger.
That's the crucial link. The sensitization process had already begun.
So with the initial autopsy being a dead end, how did they finally prove it was AGS? What was the breakthrough?
This part of the story is some real medical detective work. The idea actually came from the victim's wife and her friend, a pediatrician named Dr. Erin McFeely.
Okay.
They were just talking, and one of them asked the question, could this be that red meat thing?
Wow. And that question led them to Dr. Platts Mills, the expert.
It did. He arranged for a post-mortem blood testing. This was in April, so months after the death. And what they found was it was scientifically undeniable.
What did they find?
Okay, so they found extremely high levels of antibodies to alpha-gal. That was the first clue. But the real smoking gun was his tryptase level.
Tryptase. What is that?
Tryptase is a marker. It's an enzyme that your mast cells release during an allergic reaction. The pilot's level was 2,000 milligrams per milliliter.
2,000. I don't have a frame of reference for that. What's a high but survivable number?
It's an absolutely cataclysmic number. Dr. Platzmill said the highest level he'd ever seen in someone who survived a severe reaction was maybe 90 or 100.
90 versus 2,000.
Right. He confirmed a level of 2,000 is, and I'm quoting, basically only seen in fatal cases of anaphylaxis. That test result was the nail in the coffin. It closed the case.
So that explains the what, but it doesn't explain the why. Why did his reaction become fatal when, hundreds of thousands of people are living with this allergy?
Right, and that's where we get into this idea of a perfect storm. Dr. Scott Commons at UNC, another top expert, he points out that deaths from food allergies are actually very rare. You usually need several factors to all go wrong at the same time.
What were the factors for the pilot?
The biggest risk factors for a really severe or fatal reaction are exercise and alcohol.
Why those two?
Because they both significantly speed up how quickly your body absorbs the allergen, in this case the alpha-gal, from your gut into your bloodstream.
And the sources say the pilot did both. He exercised, he mowed the lawn, and he had a beer on the day he died.
Yeah.
Right after eating the hamburger.
Exactly. That combination, on top of an already highly sensitized immune system, is what pushed the reaction over the edge. It turned a severe reaction into an inescapable, fatal one.
This is all part of a much bigger story, isn't it? The sources show this isn't just a one-off tragedy. The CDC thinks nearly 450,000 people in the U.S. might have this.
Yeah, and the number of suspected cases has shot up just since 2010.
Why is it growing so fast?
It really is a map of climate change in action. AGS is spreading because the tick that carries it, the Lone Star tick, is on the move, and so is its main host, the white-tailed deer. They're both migrating north.
And the research specifically blames warmer winters for that. The ticks can now survive in places where they couldn't before, like up in Maine or Washington.
Which creates a huge problem for doctors in those areas. If you're a doctor in Maine and you've never even seen a Lone Star tick, how are you ever going to diagnose a delayed allergic reaction to a hamburger?
And the data on that, it's actually pretty worrying. There was a CDC report in 2023 that found a huge knowledge gap.
Huge. 42% of doctors they surveyed said they'd never even heard of AGS.
2%.
And another 35% said they wouldn't be confident in how to diagnose or treat it. So if the doctors aren't even looking for it, they're absolutely going to miss it.
So the advice really has to be for anyone who spends time outdoors. You have to be your own advocate.
Absolutely. If you're getting weird stomach upset or itching or hives, and it's happening specifically 3 to 6 hours after you eat red meat or even high-fat dairy like ice cream, you have to consider alpha-gal. That delay is the key.
So what does this all mean? I mean, the pilot's death, it feels like a real watershed moment.
I think so.
It proves that this delayed anaphylaxis isn't just some weird quirk. It can be fatal. This case just hammers home how important it is to connect those weird, seemingly random symptoms to a tick bite, especially if you live somewhere the Lone Star tick is just starting to show up.
It's a serious risk, but there is a little bit of a silver lining. Dr. Commons did point out that the allergy isn't always permanent.
Really? It can go away.
It can. If you are extremely diligent about avoiding any more tick bites, the sensitivity can actually fade over time. For some people, it might disappear completely after about 3 to 5 years.
That's some real hope for people who get this.
It is, but we're still facing an accelerating threat. And given that we know there's a direct link between the spread of AGS and climate-driven migration of ticks and deer, it raises a big question for you to think about.
Okay.
What kind of new preventative measures should public health officials be focused on, beyond just telling people to wear bug spray, especially in these northern areas that are now at risk? We have to start thinking about where these ticks are going next and how to get ahead of them.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.